let's get this started.
Dina?
Thank you everyone for joining us. Today we are honored to welcome Dr. Izenstark to our second to last Psych talk of the semester. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for those of you who are watching this video later on. I will not be having the honor of introducing our speaker today. For that, I will be passing it over to Dr. Iterdibide. Maria, if you would not mind introducing our speaker.
No, I don't mind. It is an honor and a privilege and a pleasure to introduce Dina Izenstark. Dr. Izenstark received her Ph.D. from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign from the Department of Human Development and Family Studies. Is that what it was called when you graduated? Because when I got there, it was something else.
Yes.
Okay. Like they changed the name. I don't know when they changed it. She is currently an assistant professor at San Jose State University in the Department of Child Adolescent Development. Is it Laurie College of Education?
Yep.
Ooh, I'm good. I believe she's presenting the research that I kind of sort of helped collect at one point. Oh, you are cool. Yay.
Yes.
I had the pleasure of working with Dina on her dissertation data. It was a lot of fun. And I'm really happy to get to see like the end result of it. So with great joy, I present to you Dr. Dina Izenstark. Take it away.
And then let me share my screen. All right, can you all see it okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So hello everyone, and I just want to start by saying thank you so much to Dr. Iterdibide for that wonderful introduction, and thank you to Erin for helping organize my visit. I also know it's a really busy time of the semester, so I also appreciate all of you taking the time to come to my presentation today. And given that it's Earth Day, I'm especially excited to talk with you today about the benefits and the effects of the natural environment on children and families. And I'm just going to open my chat so I don't miss anything. And then it says, oh, it says you can see the whole screen, not just the slide. Okay, hold on. I'm going to stop sharing and then do a new share. All right. Thank you so much. This would be much better. Is it better now?
Yes, we're just seeing the slides now.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much for letting me know that. All right, so in my presentation today, I'm going to start by just telling you a little bit more about my professional journey, talk about the theoretical framework that guides my work. I'll go into detail on a research study we conducted that looked at the benefits of nature in terms of attention, mood, and family relationships. And at the end, I'm happy to answer any questions that you all have. So just to begin, I am an interdisciplinary scholar with a strong background in both human development and family studies and recreation. So I earned my Bachelor of Science and Master of Science degrees in recreation management. And then I worked for 2 years as a leisure services supervisor at a park district. And during that time, I found that although I enjoyed implementing kind of recreation programs in the community, the thing that I was most interested in was how the participants of those programs, the children and families, how participating in those programs benefited their development, their health, and their well-being. So that really influenced me to pursue my PhD in human development and family studies at Illinois. And then that's why I consider myself an interdisciplinary scholar, because I really pull from both recreation and environmental psychology, as well as from the human development field. So I'd like to just mention that when I returned to grad school, even though I knew I was generally interested in parks and nature and children, I didn't know exactly what I was going to study. And so kind of serendipitously, my first semester as a grad student, I was approached by the Forest Preserve, the County Forest Preserve District, and they said, We're opening a new nature playscape. Would you be interested in coming and evaluating the playscape? So I said, oh, sure. So initially I set out to examine how the playscape affected children's play. However, what caught my interest was really the role of the family. When I spent my summer there observing, interviewing, and surveying parents, I noticed that they weren't talking about how the playground influenced their child's development. I noticed they were really talking at length about how it was a unique context that positively influenced their family relationships. So when I began reading more about families and nature in the environmental psychology, human development, and family studies and family leisure literatures, I noticed that each field by itself only gave us a little bit of insight into why family-based nature activities are important. And this really created silos in our understanding and really kind of a lack of theoretical and empirical integration. So for my qualifying exam, it really influenced me to develop a conceptual model that really integrates these distinct theoretical traditions and fields together to better understand the relationship between families and nature in daily life. So just very briefly, I'm going to talk about some of the contributions from these disciplines and also their limitations when used alone. So the environmental psychology literature clearly shows, like overwhelmingly shows, that time spent in nature provides a rich context for promoting health and well-being among individuals. Specifically, a lot of research uses attention restoration theory that shows that a walk in nature as short as 20 minutes can restore your attention. So that can improve your concentration. It can help reduce mental fatigue. And once your attention is restored, it really allows you to pick up on social cues more easily, feel less irritable, and have increased self-control, all variables that can potentially help you get along better with others. So while this literature clearly shows the benefits of nature, some of the limitations is that none of the research kind of up to that point had ever looked at the benefits of nature for families. Additionally, most of the research focused on the short-term benefits of spending time in nature and really didn't take into consideration the long-term effects of what about a family that participates in nature every Sunday or across a young child's early life course. So that really leads us to the family studies literature, specifically the family rituals perspective, which really helps us understand how and why repeated family interactions are so important. As family rituals are associated with a variety of benefits, including that it helps foster identity, sense of belonging, it provides continuity of meaning across generations, and just like many other family outcome benefits. However, a limitation of this work is that it doesn't really take into consideration context, which leads us to the last field of family leisure. And so this field shows that the context of family leisure matters. In fact, some view it as one of the few experiences that bring family members together for any significant amount of time today. And just like family ritual theory, it shows that families that spend time together in family leisure, it's associated with cohesion and stronger unity and increased satisfaction with family life. However, some of the limitations is that the research up to date has not really taken into consideration specific types of family leisure activities and whether some provide more benefits than others. And it focuses so much on the quantity of time together that it hasn't really taken into consideration the quality of the interaction. So therefore, once again, in order just to better understand how families engage with nature in daily life, we integrated concepts from each of these three fields to develop the family-based nature activities framework. And this framework, the idea of it is that it predicts that the short-term benefits of spending time in nature can have long-term positive effects for families. And so this framework has really guided my work ever since. So moving on, that's kind of the theoretical framework that guided my work. And now we're going to move into my dissertation study. And so this study and I hope for all of you who are conducting your master's thesis and your dissertation, one day we collected a lot of extra data, and since then we've really been able to actually publish several articles from this larger data set. So today I'm really going to just present some of key research questions across 3 different studies, and then I provide the citations throughout the presentation in case you want to ever look up any in more detail. But generally, the study design is that it's a within subjects experimental design where we looked at a walk in nature compared to a walk at a mall among mothers and daughters. And I'll talk kind of more about those features as we move along. So the research questions that I'll present to you today include the following. So based on the 2 walks, do mothers and daughters have improved attention after the nature walk compared to the indoor walk? Do they express more positivity and reduced negativity during the nature walk compared to the indoor walk? Do they display greater dyadic cohesion after the completion of the walk? And do mothers and daughters report getting along better outdoors or indoors? So those are really the research questions I'll talk about today. So some of you might be thinking, well, why did you only recruit mothers and daughters? So we specifically recruited mother-daughter dyads in this study to preserve statistical power, knowing that I would have a much smaller sample size. And also the research was conducted in the Midwest. So we kind of had a shorter time period to complete the study before winter set in. I specifically chose daughters between the ages of 10 and 12 to participate because it's a developmental age period in which they could cognitively understand all elements of the study. And the research shows that pre-adolescents tend to spend more time with their parents than adolescents. So the study sample that we collected, we had 27 dyads. They were primarily Caucasian, a little bit over half were in married relationships, and 40% had a household income of $75,000 or more. And in terms of the age of the participants, we really had an equal distribution of 10, 11, and 12-year-olds in the study, which was nice. So next, I'll kind of move into the research design. So in regards to the research design, all of the participants engaged in 2 different environmental treatments that were identical in design and each consisted of 3 phases. So for each of these environmental treatments, just so you know, they were all counterbalanced and they all occurred 1 week apart on the exact same day of the week and the exact same time of day to try to keep it as consistent as possible. So in phase 1, participants first met at the research home and engaged in a 10-minute attention fatiguing activity where they had to solve math problems and word search puzzles for 10 minutes with construction noise playing in the background. And I always like to just quickly just play that clip for you of what construction noise they heard in the background to help you kind of envision what was going on. So the idea of the construction noise and the math problems and word search puzzles, the idea was to tax their attention to increase the sensitivity to the effects of the intervention. So then after the attention fatiguing activity, the mom and the daughter went into separate rooms in order to measure their attention. And then once their attention was measured, they came back to the main room and they were told what location they were walking at that day. So they had no prior knowledge of where they were walking until kind of that moment in the study. And again, it was all counterbalanced. So half of the participants did the Arboretum location first and the other half did the mall location first. And we specifically chose these settings because both were 3 miles away from the research home. They both had a walking path that had a circular route, flat terrain, and had a very similar volume of people there. So they did the 20-minute walk, and while they were walking, we audio recorded their conversations, and we also gave them a timer just so they knew when exactly 20 minutes were up. So after the walk, in the third and final phase, they came back to the research home and we had them engage in a 10-minute interaction task. And this interaction task, they were asked to solve puzzles because puzzles drew on their attention, but it also caused them to have to work together throughout the task. Once they completed all phases of each experimental design, at the very end of the study, we also did a 10 to 15-minute interview with both the moms and the daughters in separate rooms to find out more about their experience doing this study, and then generally learn more about some of their family outdoor activities. So that's the research design, and I'm happy to take questions at the end. It feels weird just to keep moving through. Next, I'll go ahead and talk about some of the measures that we used. So attention was operationalized using the digit span backwards test, and it measures subjects' attention and executive functioning by having them listen to a sequence of numbers. So you would say 4, 6, and the researchers used the metronome just to make sure that they were saying them at the same pace. And then the participant has to repeat the sequence back in reverse order. So if I said 4, 6, then the participant would say 6, 4. And then you keep going, and it gets harder and harder until the participant gets 2 consecutive ones incorrect, and then you tally their total number that they had correct in order to measure attention. In terms of measuring expressed effect, we used those 20-minute audio recordings that we had, and we broke them up into 30-second intervals. And so 3 trained and reliable coders used the modified version of the System for Coding Interactions and Family Functioning in order to measure observed or expressed effect during the walk. So specifically, we looked at positivity and negativity, and we coded moms and daughters separately. And positivity was characterized by the extent to which individuals displayed positive emotional talk, such as "I enjoy walking here," and or positive affect in terms of laughing. And then negativity was characterized as clear expressions of tension, frustration, anger, irritation, and hostility through negative emotional talk, as well as more subtle forms of negative effect, including tension in the voice. So just as a reminder, attention was measured before and after. Expressed effect was measured during each walk. And then finally, when they completed the entire experiment, they came back to the research home, and we also looked at their dyadic cohesion through the 10-minute interaction task. And with this one, we used video recorded direct observations, but once again, across the 10-minute video recording, for every 30-second interval, we gave them a score between 0 and 3. So 0 meant like lack of cohesion, the characteristic did not exist, and a 3 meant that it was cohesion was highly characteristic throughout that 30-second interval. And so in this study, dyadic cohesion was measured as a sense of unity, togetherness, and closeness within a family. And for all of the observations, we tried to blind the coder to the experimental condition, but it was much harder to do that with the audio recordings because you could just tell what they were talking about. But we definitely blinded them in terms of the interaction task. And then I just wanted to let you guys know too that 20% of the videos were double coded in order to increase inter-rater reliability, or to show inter-rater reliability. I'm just going to, sorry. All right. So next, one thing that I also wanted to show you, and I have permission based on the pilot that we have done, is kind of give you an idea of what this interaction task looked like, so you could get a better idea of what a 3 would look like if you were coding this in terms of a 30-second interval. So again, I have permission, I promise, from these participants. And this is just an example of a 30-second interval of them doing the interaction task. So let me pull this up for you all and I'll play it.
The purple chip is directly on the right.
Side of the yellow chip. Mm-hmm. You got it.
I got this.
That's my logic, girl. Bam. Move on.
Wait.
Oh, no.
Nice job. How about,
How about
I
you
do?
just solve the puzzles and take the pictures?
All right, so that's just one example of a 30-second clip, and that was an interval that we coded as a 3 because you could see they interacted with one another. You saw kind of the closeness, the unity, they looked at one another, compared to a 0 that might be more characterized as each person working on their own and not interacting with the other. All right, so that is the methods. And next we're going to move into the results. So what did we find? So I just want to repeat the research questions because I know it's been a minute since I read them out loud to you. But the first question we were interested in was, do mothers and daughters have increased attention after the walk in nature compared to the indoor walk? And we found the following. So I'm just going to show you all the results and then kind of walk you through it. So this is the mothers and then this is the daughters, and the green line represents the nature walk and the purple is the mall walk. And so this is their pre-attention score and then this is their post score, pre-post. So to answer this question, I conducted a 2-factor repeated measures ANOVA to determine if there was a mean difference in attentional functioning based on the walking location and the time of the test for the mothers and daughters. And we found for mothers, there was a setting by time interaction in that with the using paired sample t-test, we found that mothers had a statistically significant improvement in attention from before and after the walk at the park, but that was not true for the mall walk. So we found what we hypothesized for the mothers, and then for the daughters, we only found a main effect for time. So both at the mall location and the nature location, they did their attention did improve in both settings. So that was our first finding for attention. Yes, setting by time interaction for mothers and daughters, we only found the main effect for time. Now, this research, I just want to highlight, really expands the environmental psychology literature, because up until this study, all previous studies that had a similar design only looked at the attentional benefits of walking alone. So our research study really showed that when you walk with your daughter or your mother, mothers in fact did experience attention restoration, especially in the nature condition. And for daughters, just walking with their mother outdoors, they did experience an increase in attention after each walk. All right, so our next research question. So this one we were interested in, do mothers and daughters express more positivity and reduce negativity during the nature walk compared to the indoor walk? So for this question, just once again, this was from the 20-minute audio recording during each walk, and moms and daughters were coded separately. To answer this question, a series of 2x2 repeated measure ANOVAs were computed for each measure of expressed effect during the walks. So in terms of positivity, this is the nature and the mall condition for moms. And then for the daughters, this is the nature and the mall condition for the daughters. So there was no statistically significant differences, but it is important to note that the main effect of setting in the nature condition was approached, but it did not reach statistical significance. So for this one, there was just no statistical significant differences, that both settings, the mothers and daughters expressed positivity during their walks. However, for negativity, we did find that there was a significant main effect for person. So you could see here, again, this is the mothers, this is the daughters. The darker green is the nature, the lighter green is the mall. As you can see, there's a significant main effect for person in that daughters had displayed a much higher negativity than mothers in general. But we also found a significant main effect for setting, and that both mothers and daughters displayed less negativity during the nature walk compared to the mall walk. And so when you look back at the literature, this finding is pretty significant, because when you look at stress reduction theory and attention restoration theory, those theories highlight that when you are outside, oftentimes it's stress reducing, and that physiological response can lead to lower levels of expressed negativity. So what we saw is kind of what we wanted to see, that when a mom and daughter walked together, they experienced those lower levels of negativity outdoors. When we think about why didn't we find a difference in positivity, it could just be that they both enjoyed the family leisure experience, they enjoyed the time that they had together, and they enjoyed walking together. But the theory really highlights that negativity piece. So we were excited, of course, that this finding aligned so well with the literature. All right, so the third research question, do mothers and daughters exhibit greater dyadic cohesion after the walk in nature compared to the indoor walk? So again, this is after they've completed both settings, and they do the interaction task. So the idea is almost like, is there a carryover effect? Do they get along better after their walk together? And for this one, we used a one-way repeated measure ANOVA to compare the mean scores on the outdoor versus the indoor setting. And we found that on average, mother-daughter dyads did experience significantly greater cohesion after the walk outdoors compared to the indoor walk. And so here's the nature, here's the mall, you see that significant finding. But again, beyond that, and how it really expands the literature, is really showing that even when they're done walking, they displayed greater dyadic cohesion. All right, so I've presented to you already a lot of our quantitative findings, but I wanted you not to only think about our participants as like statistical significance and different like measures of how they did on different measures, but I also just wanted to give you a brief opportunity to hear from some of the participants. So this last question was in the follow-up interview after they completed the entire study. We asked the participants, well, the question was, do mothers and daughters report getting along better outdoors or indoors, and why? So we specifically asked participants this question, and they overwhelmingly reported getting along better outdoors. But when you look at the reasons why, it's quite exciting, because it just really nicely aligns with the tenets of the FBNA framework. So first, we use thematic analysis, and one theme that we identified is that both mothers and daughters expressed how when they were outdoors, they really had an improved psychological state. They described how when you're outside, it's easier to get along with one another, you're more relaxed, you're happier, you're in a better mood. And they described how those characteristics made it even easier to communicate with one another. So this is a quote from a mother, and she said, I think she's not as stressed outside, and I'm probably not either. So I think it's better for both of us, more relaxing, in terms of why she thinks they do get along better outdoors. Another theme we identified was that there was kind of a reduction in parental policing outdoors. So mothers described how kind of all the non-fun parenting stuff occurs indoors, a context in which they often have to play the role of taskmaster in terms of, did you do your chores? Did you do your homework? You need to clean up. But when they're outdoors, they felt like they can get along better because there was less like having to be in control of all those things, and there was less arguing over those things. So this is from a daughter, and she said, we're going to play and not worry about all the other stuff that should have been done before free time when we're outdoors, as an explanation for why they get along better. And then finally, the last theme that came up in terms of why did they overwhelmingly report that they get along better outdoors. And both the mothers and daughters talked about that they felt like when they were outdoors, it was more surrounded kind of around purposeful engagement. And that kind of goes back to the family leisure literature, that like they're consciously and purposely spending outdoor leisure time together. And when they do that, it really encourages them to focus on one another with fewer external distractions. They talked about how when you're inside, you're kind of thinking more about work and school, and you're on your electronic devices, and each person's kind of in their own separate room. But when you're outside, you're just really able to focus on one another without all of those external distractions. So just to summarize, based on the results of our larger research study, we found that walking outdoors restores attention, especially for mothers. Mothers and daughters displayed less negativity on their walk outdoors compared to indoors. They reported, they displayed greater dyadic cohesion after the nature walk. And in interviewing them, they reported getting along better outdoors compared to indoors. So based on the results of our study, I hope it encourages all of you to spend some time outside, especially today, given that it's Earth Day. But even, before this meeting today, we were talking about, this semester, a lot of us are experiencing Zoom fatigue. And so research overwhelmingly shows that if you spend time outdoors, even if it's just a walk as short as 20 minutes, it could really help reduce your mental fatigue and improve your concentration. And even though I didn't go into the details today, even if you can't get outside, just looking at nature outside a window or having plants at your home or your office, it also provides restorative attentional benefits. I hope you spend time outside today as a way to improve your mood, and then hopefully you'll get along better with others. And I hope you develop kind of long-term family rituals outdoors, just knowing how spending time outside contributes not only to the individual health benefits, but also family outcomes. So with that said, similar to how Dr. Iturbide started, I just wanted to acknowledge the people who really helped me in conducting my dissertation study. And you could see it really took a lot of people that I'm kind of indebted to forever. So I always have to thank my advisor, Dr. Erin Abada, who really just encouraged me to pursue a program of research that I was passionate and interested in. And then I also really have to give a heartfelt thanks to Dr. Maria Iturbide, because she was such a mentor to me throughout my whole dissertation. For those of you who know her, she's just a guru of methods and analysis. And so it was just so nice to have her as a confidant to talk to, to help lift you up when you were feeling down. But also, if any of the research assistants had to cancel, she even helped implement the study. So I just can't thank her enough for that mentorship. So that is all I have for you today. With every presentation I've ever given, I like to always show my dog Benji, but I'm also happy to answer any questions that you have.
Aw, Benji. Thank you. We'd like to open it up for questions if anybody
I
has.
could stop sharing if you all prefer, or keep sharing the screen.
You can keep Benji up for a few.
Okay.
I miss Benji.
If you have questions but don't want to directly speak, please feel free to message them to either myself or Taylor Alexander Salazar, and we will speak on your behalf. If turning off your microphone makes you uncomfortable in any way, shape, or form, we'll be your voice for you.
I have a question. Oh, go ahead.
Okay. It was a pretty small sample size in your research, and I was wondering if anybody has replicated your study or done it on less educated, less wealthy populations who, obviously we would think they would benefit from access to nature too, but they may tend to have less leisure time in those populations.
And I just want to write down your question because I feel like it goes two-part. I don't want to miss it. So let me know if I miss any part of it. So this study was kind of just like a foundational study. And it was a much smaller sample size, and just being able to conduct the within subjects experimental design really helped increase the power of the sample in terms of the analyses, in terms of like the characteristics of the participants were the exact same. I hope future people will replicate this study because the whole design was replicated off of environmental psychology research that really only looked at individuals walking in nature. In terms of trying to think about the benefits of nature, as you said, for groups who might not have as much money or as much time, that's what I'm really excited about now. And that's kind of where my research has been heading, where at San Jose State University, I've been able to conduct a few research studies kind of looking at diverse populations and diversity in kind of a variety of different ways. And what's really cool about the environmental psychology literature is that it shows that sometimes the people that benefit most from nature are the lowest income people. So if you have a lot of income, you could just drive to your yoga class to relax. You could drive, to a spa. You have all access to a variety of different services, but it's low income people who benefit the most from living in areas where you have green space out your window. And it's just tied to so many health outcomes that you wouldn't even think in terms of like birth defects and attention and self-control, like, and again, people say like, oh, it's hard to identify it as that one factor, but overwhelmingly income is kind of one that shows, again, that low income people who have that access to green space compared to those who don't have so many more benefits if you have more access to nature. So I think that's a great question, and I'd love to replicate it, of course, with like more diverse samples as we continue to move forward. And I'm trying to think, like, even in a research study that we're trying to publish right now, where we looked at Latinx and Asian American experiences in nature with their families across the early life course. One of the findings was that income for those participants who lower income participants who maintained their outdoor family leisure across the life course, it was associated with greater family outcomes in adulthood. But for participants who had higher income, you saw after middle childhood, it just dropped. Like they stopped engaging as many family outdoor activities, but it was the low income participants who really maintained that participation. So I just think that's a great question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Other questions?
I believe we have another question from somebody else who spoke up, if they want to ask their question now.
Yeah, I did have a question. Sorry. I might have missed this, but I was just curious if you so you do run a research lab at San Jose State.
That's a great question. So when I was looking at the psychology department at Humboldt State, it's so exciting that you guys have PhD students and master students and undergrads. When at San Jose State, especially in our department, we have a few master's students, but not very many, and then primarily undergraduate students. So I don't consider it a lab, but I've worked with research assistants every semester, and even just that acknowledgement page. It's been fun to add those students as we've published articles from this data set together. So it's not necessarily, I saw Maria's lab and I'm like, oh, it's so exciting. You have a true lab, but we're definitely continuing to collect data and publish. But it's just different when our population is primarily undergraduate students.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, thank you.
I know Stephanie, there was a question in chat, but I do want to acknowledge one that came before. Somebody asked if you would talk about the inspiration for your study, this particular study that you presented today.
Well, I think it goes even further back. So, I talked about how when I came back from grad school, I did a study on the playscape and just seeing the families that were out there together, maybe because at first I thought I was going to do research on children and nature, and then it was really the families that stood out to me. But I think my passion and interest in just nature in general is that Growing up, I came from a low income family. I was a first generation student. And when I think back of my family experiences growing up, the best times we had were outdoors. And those are kind of like my favorite memories. So I think something about like it being free and accessible, and especially in the area that I lived, like kind of like planted a seed much earlier on in my life that like stuck with me, because I remember, and I'm sorry if I'm getting off topic, like I remember being in grad school and kind of feeling like I loved being outdoors, but at like parks and more pristine areas when I wasn't like the biggest like wilderness person, because I'm like, oh, there's bugs and, other things. And then I remember talking to Dr. Andrea Faber Taylor, who taught me all about attention restoration theory. And she kind of said the same thing. And then it just made me feel better of like, oh, I can study nature and I do love it. And then if you look more at our theoretical framework, part of what I've been trying to do in the literature too is like keep the definition of nature more broad, because some people like don't consider themselves like loving nature, but they do enjoy being outdoors. And when you look at that attention restoration theory, the idea is that you're in a place where you feel away from your stress, it's compatible with your goals, like all of that aligns. So you should be able to define outdoors in terms of what it means to you. So I'm sorry if I got sidetracked in that answer. And I'm so glad to see that in the chat. Like we even conducted one study on rural low income families, and it's a qualitative study, but it was just so powerful to see the responses where they give examples of like when you have a low income, even commercial recreation through the YMCA of like $22 per month for each kid. Well, I have 3 kids. Now it's $66 per month and it adds up each month, but the park is right there and we have easy access to the park. So it's really, again, the research just overwhelmingly shows that low income people particularly benefit from having access to nature.
What was
Hi.
that other question?
I'm sorry. I don't want to like talk over somebody.
No, go ahead. I was just asking for more questions.
Oh, okay. Yeah, for sure. So I'm Stephanie. I just have a little bit of it's not, well, okay, let me try to form this the best I can. So I was just curious if you expected to find similar results with people who are living in more urban environments versus people who live in more rural environments and are kind of accustomed to being around nature all the time. Like kind of think even when like you go to the car, like to go to the store, like you're surrounded by all these trees and all this nature. Whereas in more urban areas, it's more buildings and more just more urban scape. And I've done some reading about people who live in those areas, and sometimes like based off of what I've read, like they don't hear like all these sounds that are going off around them all the time because they're used to that sort of thing. That's kind of their norm. So I'm just really curious. I was just thinking about that with like the construction noise that you played. I'm thinking like, well, sometimes like that's people's lived reality. Like that's normal to them. So I'm just curious. I mean, just based off of that.
Yeah, I definitely, and I'm just feel like I'm kind of hypothesizing based on your great question, because I just kind of like just even you describe the sound element of it, where I feel like I read an article recently that talked about someone who moved to New York, and they just like the sound, and they just felt like they never could get away from like all the noise, and it really impacted their mental health. And so like sound is like definitely a reality in terms of being able to experience that restoration. And even when we looked at locations in order to conduct this study, we had to take into effect like how much sound was in the background, because we wanted it to feel like a more natural space. So I have not like yet specifically conducted a study comparing urban versus rural in terms of like an experimental design. But this last summer, a colleague and I collected data from fathers of middle childhood youth during the pandemic. So I collected data from urban fathers, and she collected data from rural fathers. And so we're still kind of in the process, honestly, of analyzing that data. But just kind of similar to what you said already, we see that urban fathers, they have access to nature, but it's just so much more limited in terms of they could go to a park, or they might be able to ride their bike like just around in a circle in their neighborhood. But it was the rural fathers who just seemed like they had greater access to different types of nature for sure. And it was just like bigger and more expansive. So I think, I'm not sure if that answered your question, but I just think it's a great question. But I think it also just highlights like the need for urban environments to also still incorporate green spaces in the design of those environments, knowing the benefits of nature. Because overwhelmingly, the green space research shows that if you have more trees, just more greenness for people to look at, that is tied into a variety of different health outcomes and does improve attention. So I'm sorry if I didn't answer your question completely, but just kind of what it made me think of.
Well, that's really awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Do we have any more? Do we have any additional questions? Again, if you don't want to speak up, please feel free to message us in the chat. Or if you have more questions after asking your first, please don't be afraid to speak up again.
I have a question.
Go
So
ahead.
Dina, how are you, I mean, you mentioned you're collecting data now during the pandemic, but are you having to make more accommodations because of it? I mean, I feel like there's going to be a big cohort effect because of the pandemic in your results, because we're so limited in that. And how are you taking that into account in your research?
And that's a great question. And so I just want to highlight the survey data that we collected from college students that we're trying to publish. That was all before the pandemic, of looking at individuals living in an urban area that were primarily Latinx and Asian American. So if you see those studies coming out, it was collected before the pandemic. But I just love your question in regards to during the pandemic, because even when you look at studies that looked at outdoor recreation participation month by month during the pandemic, it significantly varied. And so while we collected this father data right when the pandemic happened, I think March, April, May, and June, like already I feel like we need to put a disclaimer that this was collected early in the pandemic, and these perceptions might most likely have changed as the pandemic continued on. Because I think like in it, there's like a lot of hopefulness and like, oh, I love spending more time with my kid. Like it's almost too positive because they kind of liked the shift. And I think similar to how our students have been experiencing, other people, like as it's continued on, I don't think people are like that as excited about like all the time they have together and like online school. Like none of that had happened for another whole year at the time the data was collected. So we'll definitely write that as a limitation, but that's a great question.
Yeah, we're finding it in our research with the survey data we've been collecting during the pandemic. It's like, yeah, we probably didn't find anything because of the lack of social interactions or just one thing after the other, or having to, there are bigger disparities because we've had to go online. And so, yeah, that's become like, and I just feel like research moving forward this whole time period is just like, it's like a huge history effect that we need to take into account.
Oh my goodness, definitely.
It's like, yeah, things are so different. And I think even moving forward, our interactions are going to be different, at least for a while.
Definitely. And it's especially interested to look at it like, because so many people are spending time outside. So a lot of the fathers were like, oh, are you doing this study because more people are spending time outside? And to be honest, we already had the study lined up. So it's just interesting to even think about if like after the pandemic, as things open, if even nature participation like significantly declines, or if people maintain what they've been doing, for sure.
Oh, that'd be interesting to see. That's cool. Well, that was my question. Do we have any other questions for Dr. Izenstark? I will show my face again. Hopefully my internet doesn't go poo-poo. Well, if you would all please, if there aren't any more questions, please give a big round of applause and a big thank you to Dr. Izenstark for coming and sharing her research with us and sharing Benji. I know Benji. Thank you so much, Dina. I so appreciate it. Hopefully we can actually get you to come up to Humboldt. You would love it.
Yes, I really would. I can't wait to go there one day.
You'd really love it. It'd be great. Thank you,
Oh.
everyone.
On that note, I am going to stop the recording for those of you watching this video later on. Thank you for watching Scholars of Academic Research Psych Talks. We do have one more talk planned for this semester. Please be on the lookout for that. More details incoming when we have them. And again, thank you again to Dr. Izenstark for her fabulous presentation and presenting her wonderful research for us today. Thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your day and a great, wonderful rest of your semester.
And thank you all again so much.